Dr. Bove. Welcome to Men's Couch. The show, as always, we're always promoting men's mental health and also uh, authentic male friendship. And the project was started when I was a freshman in college. Oh, it feels weird saying that now. Yeah,
Way back,
because like
like
I'm gonna be a senior this fall semester, so it feels weird saying that.
congratulations.
Um, It just started as like it was just me and my friends just getting together to talk about mental health. I didn't like think it would become like a big thing. Now it's like kind of really exploding, if you will. It's getting more attention from professionals and also more social media attention. So that's something that I didn't envision at like the start, but it's something that I see this is a really good thing um that is getting the attention that it is because uh, these are topics that I feel like a lot of people are very hesitant to talk about, or just there's like maybe spaces for it, but not like on a wide scale. But yeah, I'm excited to know about what your research has been on men's friendships and also what your research has been on sexuality.
Yeah. So I got my PhD in human sexuality education at Widener. A lot of people come through that program and do a lot of really good work. And while I
Mm.
was there, I really just focused on masculinity studies. I kind of made, I almost made my own curriculum in a way because like there wasn't really much there. I mean, Dr. Heasley, who was on your show before, taught a
Yeah.
men and masculinities class, but so I was sort of the probably the student that I don't know if my teachers liked me or not, but like I was always, whatever the project was, I was like, I'm going to find an angle to talk about, men's identity and men's friendships,
Yeah.
men's, so that was kind of my thing. I worked a lot on the literature on men's identity development. And then that ties into a lot of what you just said and a lot of the stuff about
Hmm.
men's friendships. And then that was my dissertation. Well, a very
It's really interesting.
a very specific aspect of that, which, we can get into, but yeah.
Yeah, that's very interesting that you because I'm very like I'm interested in all this stuff and I feel like making like and going approaching it like academically and also like research based, I think it's important. I also like felt it was like I think like for the longest time I felt it was just weird. It's like okay, I'm just interested in this very sector masculinity or mental health. I'm very interested in the development of friendship and also how we perceive our own identities and how we relate to other men. I think that's very important in when we talk to other men. How are we expressing our identity and how are we acknowledging other people's identity? I think and that also of course ties into mental health. Over the past 5 or 6 years, there's been like a lot of articles being published about the loneliness epidemic. I haven't done much research on that. I've done like a ton of research on friendship. Like I have a book right here that like I have right here.
Oh yeah, yeah, Nardi. Yep, yep.
Okay.
That's
Okay.
that 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 that's a big one. Yeah, that was
So
yeah,
you're familiar.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I've done like a lot of research on it. It's pretty interesting and it's something that I want to just explore more, whether it's academically or research or just like as like a rising therapist. So yeah.
Have you read Niobe Way's book, Deep Secrets?
It's somewhere in here.
Yeah. I mean, that book really changed my understanding of sort of adolescent men's friendships. Really, really good stuff.
I just have so many books. I don't know where it
Yeah,
is
of
right
course.
now. So
No, I know. I don't always remember all of them, but that one made a real impression on
yeah.
me. But yeah, I mean, what you said about identity management, I mean, that's key, right? We know the components of communication, and there are several components of communication, one of which is identity management. So it is a
Mhm.
big part of communication. Like communication scholars will tell you this.
Yeah.
And there's a piece of masculinity in there. When I did some research on men's identity, right? My whole theory, I'm not really a theory. I mean, it's backed by the literature, but basically it's sort of what we know from the research. And I'm sure you just know this intuitively is that
Mhm.
sense of belonging or what they call belongingness, right? Belongingness is just a key human need, right?
Yeah.
And I think the thing with masculinity historically, and maybe it's changing. I think in your generation it's changing, and that gives me hope. But in order to belong to the masculinity club, right, you had to adhere to certain rules,
Yeah.
and masculinity has historically been pretty narrowly defined.
I
And
have
so
something to add to that when you're
okay.
finished.
Well, I'll try to be brief. Basically, the
Yeah.
idea is because the idea is like, how do we explain men things like bro code? Things like trying to be a bro or whatever. Men like excusing other men's bad behavior or that kind of stuff. And my answer is, men really want to belong to the club. They want to belong to a group.
Yeah.
And since masculinity is so narrowly defined, and you can get kicked out kind of at any time for
Yeah.
like all
Yeah.
kinds of minor transgressions, there's always this pressure that you're not going to be in the club anymore. And
Mhm.
so it drives a lot of men's interactions, like their social interactions, their relational, interactions. It's driven by this fear and this sense of like masculinity so narrowly defined that if I'm not in that, what do I have? Who am I?
Yeah. Yeah. What I've noticed in my generation is that a lot of young men seem to be exhausted by the standard or by like a narrowly defined definition of masculinity. I see them like they're very just tired of performing, tired of trying to keep everything together. And they're just like, they'll like what I see is like just they feel like they have to like wear a mask. And then like when things happen, they'll, like, say to me or, like, to other people's well, I'm not, like, actually, like I'm not as, like I guess the word is, like, I'm not as kept together as I seem to be, and I'm just, like, tired of always trying to be on, whether socially, whether it's how they feel in regards to their identity, always having to feel like they need to be on presenting a certain way. So,
Mhm.
I think that's what I see. And I think I also see that contributing to a lot of anxiety. So I think that's yeah, I can see that. Not to say that like I think there is like you said, we're getting better in how we are approaching our masculinity, but I think the effects of like historically, I think Gen Z we still like internalize that. At the same time, I think how it shows up is just more like exhaustion.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I mean, the thing about the historical arc is that men's movements have been like 1 to 2 decades behind women's movements historically. And so,
Mhm.
like, all of the accomplishments of feminism, all the way through, into the 1990s, the aughts, one of the major triumphs of feminism is that it's given young women multiple femininities that are maybe they're not equally valid. I mean, let's not go too far. There still is a
Mhm.
femininity that's more valued. But like, you can look at like an athlete femininity like Serena Williams or Simone Biles, or
Mhm.
you can have like the CEO, femininity or the politician, AOC or something. Or you can have kind of more traditional femininity and so on, right? And so like women don't have as much of that pressure that, oh, if I'm not this exact standard, I can't have any femininity, right? I can't connect.
Yeah.
Whereas men,
Yeah.
and it is changing for younger men because I do think you have younger men who like are more comfortable with dressing in different ways than men used to
Mhm.
dress, when I was growing
Yes,
up, or
yeah.
presenting themselves, in different ways. And so that's a positive. I mean, I think that's definitely a positive, but we need more of that.
Yeah, I think in regards to femininity, I think there's more like women might have more freedom when it comes to expressing themselves, and they might have more like variability and how they express their identity. They're not like they don't have to be afraid of being like gay or call it like, oh, you're too like feminine or anything. There's not like that fear that is like holding them back that I see like with and like what we talked about earlier with a lot of men is like that fear. I'm also interested because you said you mentioned you're Gen X. So I'm interested in how like what you've witnessed in masculinity for Gen X and versus like now with Gen Z.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because it also depends on when in Gen X a person is, right? So like
Yeah.
I sort of came of age and my college years were the early 90s. And in
Yeah.
a way
My parents were
the early 90s were like a really good era for some form of expansion of masculinity, right?
Mhm.
Because we had like, just consider like the grunge movement, consider
Yeah.
the difference in like glam rock of the 80s and sort of the
Mhm.
sexualization of women and the sort of, that kind of thing that happened in that period. And then grunge was like much more emotional and much more about like expressing your feelings and expressing difficult thoughts. I mean,
Like real things.
like Nirvana's music's all about that,
Yeah.
right? And or Pearl Jam, like those songs about tragedy and stuff like that. And like, so in a way, I feel like I was lucky that, And also the 90s were sort of another wave of feminism. So whatever wave you want to call
Mhm.
it, right? So maybe I usually call it third wave, but some people disagree about the waves. But so third wave feminism is happening, and then I'm going through school wanting to be like a feminist man, and wanting to be like an ally.
Mhm.
And so like in a way, I think I experienced some expansion of masculinity and some, celebration of diversity of masculinity. And then, but then, of course, I
Mhm.
witnessed the late 90s into the 2000s. And then we have culture is cyclical, right? So,
Yeah.
sort of, we go from progressivism, liberalization to regressivism, and then liberalization. And now we're in a very regressive period.
Yeah, it goes through cycles.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So, which is interesting because I feel like my generation in the begin, some of my earliest memories were of the more repressive period, and then I have hope because I went through this cycle of like improvement and hope. Whereas
Yeah.
you maybe had some years in your adolescence where things were looking pretty good, and now suddenly
Mhm.
like we have all this regressive intolerance and homophobia and transphobia and all the stuff that's happening right now. So it'd be
Yeah.
interesting to see how you feel in 20 or 30 years about that.
Yeah, I think there's a definite larger cultural context, culture and political context that needs to be considered when we talk about how we show up and how we go about our lives, um, and how we, like, feel comfortable expressing that. I think that's definitely important historically too, taking that into consideration. I think, like, knowing that culture sort of goes in cycles, I think that's why a part of me, it's like, well, yeah, I definitely have hope for the future because, culture changes and different priorities change. So I think just overall on a like foundational or fundamental level, like Gen Z, we're definitely like, because of like the importance of mental health in our generation, I see that we are prioritizing that, and that ties into how we express our masculinity. If for years masculinity was expressed in a more rigid way that might not align with Gen Z's values of being open about mental health, I think that
Mhm.
kind of makes sort of like a transition.
Oh yeah,
But
I mean,
yeah,
I can tell you, like, I can speak somewhat for my generation, but also for like my parents and grandparents. I mean, I only learned many years later about some of the mental health things that were happening within my family, right? Because it wasn't talked
yeah,
about. It just wasn't talked about, right? And so, and men, most of the men of my generation are more open about it than they were, but there isn't as much openness there either of like, hey,
yeah,
how was your therapy this week? Like that's not usually something you talk about with your buddies at the ball game or whatever. But it should be, like how was your therapy?
yeah,
What are you learning about yourself? How's that going? Are you feeling better? Like how are you feeling good? How is that changing your life? Like these are good questions. These are relational questions.
yeah,
And there's no reason that
yeah.
men can't ask these questions of their male friends. But it's a
So
struggle.
yeah, it's like a lot of barriers. Another question I wanted to ask is, when did you like, what made you start, or what drove you to start studying masculinity and men's friendships?
Yeah. Well, I'll give two slightly different answers because they're different. So in terms of just masculinity, I've been studying that since college. And a lot of it just
Hmm.
came from like having grown up in a small town in Florida and in like not a very homogenous town, and like and having come from family history, which we don't need to get into. Basically, like I went to college and it just the whole world opened up to me. And I'm like, oh,
Hmm.
there's all different kinds of people and there's all different kinds of
Yeah,
ideas in the world. And so like I got really interested in gender, reading like Judith Butler and reading, feminist scholars. And at the time, there wasn't really like a lot of masculinity literature, to be honest. Like it was still kind
hmm,
of like I told you, it was 20 years behind the women's movement. And so but then in grad school was when I really started to focus on men.
yeah,
It's also really cool because one thing you said before that I was really struck by was, this exhaustion, you said that this constant idea of masking, of having to like present your identity and
yeah.
having to be held together.
I think another thing for Gen Z men is just social media. Is it feeling like they have to present a certain image or way of life? I think that
Yeah,
plays in
yeah, yeah.
to how we perceive our identities and how we just are feeling like constantly exhausted by that.
Well, it's I mean, I don't know. Here's what I hear when you say that, and it might not be true, but it's what I hear,
Yeah.
is that there's like a constant competition, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And like and
Of,
so
like, whose life is more better or whose life is looks more presentable.
yeah, and that's capitalism, right? Like capital
Yeah.
this is the newest iteration of capitalism, is that it makes us compete with each other even on things like whose Instagram feed looks best or whatever,
Mhm.
right? Because
Mhm.
competition among men can really screw up their friendships.
Yeah. What do you so, like, even okay, so have you looked at I don't know if you studied, like, or who have witnessed, college age men and their friendships of, like, this idea of competition? Like, have you compared, like, different, like, age groups of what influences friendship or
I haven't been able to do that. I mean,
Yeah.
I defer a little bit to stuff like Naomi Way's research, right?
Yeah, like,
Where she
developmentally.
yeah, where she looked at I mean, her thesis is that boys, you know, under the age of up till the age of about 12 or 13 tend to have very close friendships with other boys, and they tend
Mhm.
to be very best buddies, you know, and very much rah, 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 supportive of each other. And then
Mhm.
they get very competitive around age 14, 15, and then
Mhm.
that tends to carry on. Now, her research, it's not by any means old, but I would not say that Gen Z is the target of her research. You know, it's not Gen X, it's not my
Yeah.
generation, but it's kind of the in
Might
between.
be millennials.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
more like that, right? So it's hard to say. I mean, I can tell you what I observe among my students, you know, because I had a bunch of students this semester who a bunch of them go to the same school. So some of the students at my college are actually high school students who are taking college credit. And I happen to have a whole bunch of students I had a whole cohort in my class this semester of students at the same high
Mhm.
school, some of whom were very clearly friends.
Mhm.
And so, I mean, I can't say that I learned a ton, but from what I observed, the men seemed very supportive of each other.
Mhm.
It actually made me really happy to see
Yeah.
the men's friendships. It gives me hope that
Yeah.
maybe there's more of that, but I don't know. Has that been your experience?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think there seems to be a drive toward more emotional intimacy in friendships
Mm,
with Gen Z
mm.
and more like support-based friendships. It seems to be more of a drive to that because we see the need for it. And like again, like because we value mental health a lot and mental health advocacy, we seem to be more driven. That seems to be more of like a value when it comes to friendship as of like, hey, you could talk to me like I'm your support system. So
Mm.
I think there's does seem to be a difference. I think there to a degree, if men don't have language for these things, that it might be a bit harder for them to either ask or receive for support from other men.
Yeah, of course.
And there's still like a little bit of like the masculinity that they feel can be like a hindrance to that, where they feel like they're like carrying this sense of I need to process everything like alone and I need to do everything by myself. There's that aspect and there's also like the looking strong, wanting to look like I mentioned earlier, like you have everything together. And inviting like that vulnerability from like another friend can kind of go against that identity that you've built up for so long.
Yeah.
The identity of yeah, I'm very independent, very self-sufficient, which I say like to a degree, there's nothing wrong with like independency or like self-sufficiency,
Of course.
but I think there needs to be a balance of having support around you and having in in having that be friendships. I think too, and I think society for like a long time, we've seemed to value romantic relationships above friendship. Like my personal belief is that friendships can be just as important. They're two different like relationships, but I think they're socially so important.
Yeah.
So,
You're a relationship anarchist,
yeah.
you know.
So
I mean, that's one of the key tenets of relationship anarchy, right? Is that we shouldn't privilege romantic relationships above all other relationships just because they're romantic relationships. You
yeah.
know, it's okay to privilege a romantic relationship, like if you have reasons to really value the other person's time or whatever. There's nothing wrong with
Hmm.
that. But if you have really deep friendships, you shouldn't just say, "Oh, well, my new romantic partner is more important than my friend." Like, no,
Yeah.
If you have
Yeah.
deep friendships, that's intimacy, and But yeah, no, I really like what you said about you have to strike this balance, right? Because some of the traditional aspects of masculinity are not necessarily bad things.
Yeah.
Self sufficiency is good. Strength is good. There are times when having emotional strength, or having not emotional strength, but having like being a little bit emotionally reserved, there are times when that can be good and positive,
Mm.
but it's just, we spent so much of the history of humanity saying, okay, here's a line, right? And we're going to put 3 or 4 human qualities over here, and we're going to make them we're going to give them to men, right? These are these few qualities. And then we're going to give vulnerability, sensitivity, empathy to women. Well,
Yeah.
that makes no sense. Like, why are men not capable of deep empathy? Why are men not capable of vulnerability? Right?
Yeah.
Why would we not want to encourage vulnerability and empathy? And yes, we
Mhm.
also want to encourage strength. Like, of course we do. But it's a trap. It's a trap to think that,
I yeah.
we have to have one. And just in terms of the theme of your show, right? Like,
Yeah.
of course, men's mental health is affected when there's all of this pressure.
Yeah, my whole show is like the opposite. It's like it's like okay, like it's weird because I was very hesitant of starting a show where we talk about like we talk about our lives because I wasn't like at that time as a freshman and just I tell people all this all the time. Before I met my current roommate, I was very like very avoidant, very closed off. Even though I'm a sensitive person, I was still very like closed off, very like avoidant, very like, yeah, don't help me. But he like it was funny because like I think when I was moving in freshman year, he like forced help on me. He was like, no, I'm gonna help you. It
Mm.
was a very different version of masculinity than what I'm used to I'm of wanting to do everything like alone. And I think that's also like I think there's a stereotype of men being avoidant. I think to a degree that can be true because like if we prioritize like hyper independence and doing everything by ourselves, then it's going to be harder for us to hold a friendship. And for
Yeah, of
me, it
course.
was very like in the initial stages of my friendship with my current roommate Alex, it was very hard for me to like open up to him because like I'm not used to this someone caring and someone wanting to like pursue me in that way. So it was very new, but it also changed like forever. It changed my like how I perceive my masculinity, then also like just how I relate to people.
Yeah, I mean, that's great to hear. I mean, the key word there is help,
Yeah.
right? The ethos of help, or the I'm trying to I'm blanking on the name of the scholar, but there's a famous feminist scholar who talks about the sort of ethics of help, and the idea of like help as a help as a fundamental human ethos. And
Mm.
it's, yeah, I mean, that's exactly it, right? Instead of I'm gonna expect you to do your own thing, and maybe I'll intervene if things get out of control. It's like, no, no, how can I help you along in life? Like, that's
And I didn't know how to take that initially because I was
yeah.
like, I don't know. I think that's also another thing too with college, being exposed to different um relational dynamics. You're exposed to new things. When you're so used to, being operating in a identity for so long. Like for me, it was just, oh no, I'm not gonna ask for anything because I feel like asking is like sort of like a burden or it doesn't like I'm not man enough if I do ask. So
Mhm,
that like I was
mhm.
operating like out of that for years, and then
Yeah,
I met
yeah, of
someone that was like completely different. I'm like, I
course.
don't. It was really like I didn't know how to. It's funny because like I look back now and like completely different because like I have a whole podcast on it but before, like, that's kind of where I started. It's like, I don't really know how to I don't know how to do this. And I think
Well well, yeah, and the other thing, I mean, like, the other piece you mentioned, you showed Peter Nardi's book there, and one of the important things about Peter Nardi's research is that he researched a lot of gay men's friendships.
mm,
So there's also compulsory heterosexuality as part of this. So, like,
yeah.
straight men struggle more with all the stuff that you and I are talking about right now. Straight
Mhm.
men struggle a lot more with this than queer men do. right?
Mhm.
Which isn't to say that queer men don't struggle, but like there's already built within queer male culture much more mutual support and help and
Yeah,
vulnerability and all of that. It's more built
yeah,
in to gay culture than it is to straight culture. And so like
yeah.
that's another piece of this whole thing. Even if you're not queer, even for straight men still need to learn this.
Yeah, that's what I've, like, figured. That's what I've at least experienced, because 'cause I'm straight and witnessing friends that are either gay or bisexual, it seems like the emotional intimacy factor or just even being open seems to be a lot more easier because not saying that like everyone's like that, but for them it might be a little bit more easier because that's a thing that they value a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I would even argue it's one of the ways you know you're queer. It can be one of the, or I should say, it can be one of the ways that you know that you're queer if you have those values. Have to You're not queer just because you have those values, but it can sometimes be a self discovery of like, oh, I don't fit in over here, you know.
Yeah.
I fit in a lot better over here, and maybe it has nothing to do with my orientation or identity, but maybe it does, you know.
Yeah, I think for me, what was different is growing up, I knew that I was always sensitive,
Yeah.
so I think I struggled more with like some traditional aspects of masculinity because I was like, yeah, I'm very sensitive, very like I identify myself as like an HSP, like highly sensitive person,
Mhm.
and like
Yeah.
I'm a
Right.
huge empath. That's another reason why I like being a therapist. Is like I'm a huge empath, so and I'm also like not like I hate sports. So
Mhm.
it's I didn't really like fit into that culture. I did find like other sectors of masculinity that I did fit in to, whether it's like gaming or just like other things I did. But I think people or like boys or young men growing up that feel that they don't fit into it. I think it has to do with like the narrowness that we talked about before. If um like, if fathers don't affirm their son's qualities, they might feel like a little bit more, like, how am I gonna fit into the whole world of masculinity? Because we talk about belonging. I
Yeah.
think we all want to belong, but I think we have to that like have that secure identity in ourselves. And I think like I feel like every guy wrestles with this, even if they're like the stereotypical like athletic guy. I think on some level they feel like part of them is not. They feel like if I show this part of myself to like other people or this area or of my personality or hobbies or what have you, it doesn't like qualify for masculinity to be a man. And that's just it's like it's really crazy when you think about it, but there's like I think there's a lot of if people like internalize that, there's a lot of like consequences, like anxiety. I feel like a lot of what I've seen is anxiety, especially like social anxiety around other men
Mhm,
because they
mhm.
feel like I don't have all the necessary qualities to be like man enough or whatever.
Oh yeah, and
So
I mean, sports culture is a really good example. There's a guy named Joe Ehrman who used to be, I think he was an offensive lineman or something in the NFL. He has this whole foundation that works on changing coaching for
mhm.
young men, you know, discouraging the kind of coaching that we used to do, where you know you yell at the person and you berate them, and you know, and encouraging different kinds of coaching. But when you think about it, it's like, you know, think about what we tell boys when, you know, in pee wee football or whatever, right? A
Mhm.
boy runs, he gets hit, he hits the ground, you know, hurts himself somehow, and he's crying, and we're like, shake it off, dust it off, get up, go. You know, that's not manly. Don't do that, right? That's not what we tell girls, you know, like girls soccer or whatever. You know, when girls get hurt in girls soccer, the coach isn't just like, shake it off, get up, you know, right? But like we, from the very earliest ages, especially, I mean, sports culture is one of the most egregious examples of this. We do this,
Uh-huh.
studies show that we do this all the time. Like studies show
Mhm.
that parents hold their boy babies less than they hold their girl babies.
Mhm.
Parents, there's less physical touch with boy babies than with girl babies. There's less soothing phrases. There's less, you know, with boy babies than with girl babies. So even from the earliest ages, we are encouraging boys to be like, man up, dust yourself off, don't cry, get up, do it, and that I don't
Yeah.
think that's changed as much as I would like, even for your
Yeah.
generation. Like it's changed a little, but I don't
Yeah.
think it's changed enough.
Yeah, I think what I see is more from it's more of like a learned emotional avoidance because if they witness other men, whether it be peers or whether it be like authority figures or just mentors, if they like witness that or they like see like, hey, my peers or like in middle school, they're like very they don't like they're very I don't know what the word is. Like they don't talk about anything. They don't talk about like real things or
Mhm,
if
mhm.
they like witness um like oh my granddad never talked about his feelings or anything so if they
Yeah.
like I feel like if they see that then when they're become into adulthood then they don't that's not like that's a learned emotional avoidance and they don't they're not I think some men might become like so like avoidant that they might become detached from what they actually like feel
Yes. Yes.
and they become like they're like I don't even know and so we have like issues that of what I talked about earlier is like operating from a mask if they operate that way for so long they're like well I'm not even like in tune with how I actually feel or what I actually want who I
Yep.
actually am it's like goes into like identity things like well I don't even know like what my authentic self is because I've been like so operating and really I think it's also like there's also a people pleasing thing that comes into play because you don't want like if you don't want like your family to see you as weird or you don't want like your peers to see you as weird if you do express emotion or if you do have more like realness to you you don't want people to like because you want to belong so you don't want to risk all that so I think for men I what I recommend is therapy to like
Yeah.
connect you back to yourself.
Well, and also, what I'm hearing in what you're saying is the notion of permission seeking, which is
Yeah.
it's in the men's literature, right? That like younger men very often find a lot of value in witnessing older men, that older men can sort of pave the way for younger men
Hmm.
to give them permission. Like, oh, okay, there's a man in my life, and he's just simple example, right? Like I'm an uncle, right? So like my nephews get to see me with my nails painted, and they get to see that like, oh,
Hmm.
some men paint their nails, and it's no big
Yeah.
deal. It's just a thing that men do. Some men do that, like no other men in my
Hmm.
family do it, but like, hey, here's one person in your family who does that, right?
Yeah.
And so like it can be super, super helpful. I mean, I know that I would have loved more of that, growing up. Like I didn't get
Yeah.
nearly enough of that.
Yeah. I mean, like another thing, like too, is also because I'm a person that like just naturally deviates from the norm, or I kind of don't really care about the norm. So like for me, I wear like I wear pink a lot. Like that's one of my favorite colors.
Yeah.
So I think like I sometimes I do it purposely. Like I'll have it like be on campus wearing pink because one I like it and two is like I want to show people that you can still be a man if you present yourself in a different way. And like I I think, I also, like I don't think it's, like, a huge thing with, like, as far as color, I don't know if that's a huge thing anymore with, like, blue or pink, I don't know if that's a huge thing with my generation. I
Yeah.
know, what, like, 100 years ago or, like, in the 1800s, pink was a guy color.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It shifted. Yeah, pink was a masculine color because of blood. Pink is blood. Pink is sanguine. Pink is like a then yeah, and then blue is a feminine color. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I think people don't really care that much anymore.
Well,
Um
no, but they do, but you are tapping into something because the way that we gender fashion, right? So like men's fashion though still, even though maybe pink is okay, like
Mhm.
men's in general isn't as flamboyant. It isn't as
It's
colorful. It isn't as
definitely not.
bright, you
No,
know? In
it's
general,
not.
if you just go to the store in the
You have
mall or
to
whatever.
although okay, so I have 2 things to say about that. Yeah, I think when I go, because when I go to H&M with my friends, it's like, I look at the men's section, it's like, "Are you kidding me?" Like,
Yeah,
there's
it's
nothing
boring.
like and it's like, I'm not gonna pay this for, like, something that's very bland. Although, like, I feel like Gen Z fashion, like, when I see on Shein is very, like it's very it's very, like, there's more, like, art and detail to it. It's not
Mm,
just, like, bland. You don't have, like, a $15 bland shirt, you have, like, more, like, style to it. So that's why I
yeah.
see, like, at least, like, on Shein, which I see, like, a lot of men from my generation gravitate toward with, like, the online shopping. I know that's, like, a huge thing. But, yeah, I think
That's great to hear. I struggled for a really long time finding, clothing that because I like to wear pattern. You can see I like to wear patterns and bright colors. And I just couldn't get a shirt, a men's shirt and
yeah.
I'm happy to wear, so-called women's clothes, but they don't tend to fit my body. So,
Yeah.
I was kind of in a little bit of a bind. And
Yeah, and
I'm glad to hear that there's more of that because, it's good for all of us to have more choice.
yeah, there's more, what I've seen is more, like, flashiness, like, more rhinestones. A lot of men wear, rhinestones. A lot of the men from, did I say my men? A lot of the men from my generation, like, they wear, like, I see nail polish. I see just more jewelry is a thing. A lot of brighter things. I think too, I think when it comes to fashion, because things recycle and get rebranded, I think because people were kinda tired of with, like, COVID, like, it was things were so dark in that era, so now we're kind of like, we're done with that era. I think people are more attracted to more brighter things,
Yeah,
psychologically speaking.
we're peacocking a little bit, we have the wanna
Yeah.
want
So
people
there's
to
a lot
see.
more, like, there's a lot more of that. Um,
That makes sense.
but yeah, I see, like, in regard to masculinity and friendship, I see a lot of hesitancy to a degree with some men in how they are able to seek and ask for support or receive support
Yeah.
or just be open about things. They might be, like, open about something, then, like, they might, like, retract.
Hmm.
I think that because of that, like, because they're not used to it, or I see that.
Well, yeah, no, the help seeking, I mean, we know all the literature tells you that men do not seek help the way that, that even against their own self-interests, right?
Yeah.
Like all the medical literature talks about this, the psychological literature talks about this. I mean, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's also like, I don't know, I would say there is one thing that I like to talk about just because it's relevant to what you're saying, is that there is kind of like there's a bias within the psychology community for certain definitions of intimacy or certain definitions of sort of like vulnerability and privileging some of those things. And I will say I'm not going to defend, traditional masculinity, but I will say that some men experience intimacy in what's called a parallel way.
Mhm.
You know, so there's face-to-face intimacy, which is like
Mhm.
we're literally sitting here talking to each other like you and me, face to
Yeah,
face,
we're,
we're
like, talk
talking, right? And that's the sort of coded as feminine form of intimacy. That's what sort of the psychology community tends to
like,
privilege.
prioritize.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
there's really good research that says that a lot of men get genuine intimacy from side by side intimacy. So, which would
Mhm.
a good example, I know it's sports, but a good example is, guys will say like, well, I golf with my buddies every Sunday, and it's
Mhm.
not just golfing. They're like, because, golf is like 5 hours and 4.5 hours is actually just riding around and talking, like it's only about half an hour of actual sports. And so like
Mhm.
all that golf cart time, all that sort of between holes time, that's men are actually connecting. Like a lot of men are connecting.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, but the literature and even the psychology community doesn't always recognize that because it's like, well,
Mhm.
you're not sitting down and talking face to
So,
face.
yeah, I guess I don't see that as valuable.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I always try to sort of encourage everyone who thinks about these topics seriously, and you obviously do, to remember that there are men who might be demonstrating some of what we want in terms of intimacy. They're just not
Mhm.
doing it in the way that I don't want to say want them to, but maybe
Yeah.
that we think they should be doing. And sometimes that gets forgotten. And so it is important to note that can be a thing.
Yeah, I think it's healthy to have that balance of, you know, intimacy during activities and also intimacy during talking.
Yeah.
So I think if we have that, we can have more of, like, a balanced approach to our masculinity and our friendships. I think we also have to, like, acknowledge that everyone's, like, comfort level in regards to emotional intimacy is gonna be different. So, some men are more comfortable, like you said, with more, like, activities, and some men are more comfortable with, like, talking. So I think we have to acknowledge that too. That
Yeah,
like
we have to leave space for that because you can't be
yeah,
angry. If you say to someone, "Hey, man, I wanna know how you're feeling, just tell me,"
yeah,
and they don't respond, you can't necessarily assume that there's something wrong with them. Like,
mhm,
they may be the kind of person where you say, "Oh, hey, let's go play some PlayStation together," and
yeah.
then while we're playing
That's
PlayStation, 10 minutes in, "Hey, how's it going?" And then suddenly they open up,
yeah,
and
yeah,
it's like, "Oh, wow," "Where was that?" 15 minutes ago. It's like, well, they
yeah.
needed a different way into it, you know?
Yeah. Or they just or, like, simple presence. Like,
Mm.
in my friendships, I noticed that, like, just being together, not, like, necessarily doing anything increases, like, emotional intimacy, whether it's, like, car rides or just being in the same room.
Oh,
So
interesting.
like, I think too, like, even not talking, I think that could, encourage people to kind of, like, "I feel comfortable now," because they kinda get warmed up to the other person.
Oh, that's really interesting. Yeah, I'm a words of affirmation person, so that's like for me that wouldn't work. But that's fascinating. I mean that's really cool. I can see how that could be really powerful for some people.
Yeah. I also think too, at least in my friendships, I don't know if like other men experiences, but I have like a lot of my friends are very very physically affectionate, very verbally affectionate.
Mm,
Um, I think that kind of I don't know if that's the norm for like all of Gen Z. I can't really, I don't want to generalize,
sure,
but
sure,
that's
sure.
definitely seems to be like a shift in some way.
That's a big shift. I mean, I can't. I would say again, not. I can't speak for all Gen X, but like that is not a common experience for Gen X people for sure.
Yeah.
Like, obviously, some people have that experience, and I actually I had more of that experience in high school because I was in theater. Like, all the theater
Yeah.
kids were like that. The theater
Yeah.
kids were like that, but the non-theater kids were not like that? So, like, a
Yeah.
lot of the people in my life, like the dancers that I know, I mean, like,
Mhm.
social dancers, people who do, like, blues dancing and that kinda stuff. Dancers tend to be more physically affectionate and, like, that you get that from them. But, like, a lot of the gamers that I know are definitely not physically affectionate at all.
Yeah. I don't know. I can't really point to why. Maybe like the shift is, um, maybe like we recognize like, oh, we're a lot of us in the modern age or whatever, like we're lonely, so that maybe like encourages people to be more to express their value to each other. I think also I don't know if I guess we could say COVID pushed people to be more intentional
Yeah.
about their relationships.
I
So
also think Gen Z is a lot less homophobic in general. Like,
yeah,
homophobia was a huge part of it. Like, men of my generation, there was still a lot of homophobia, a lot of slurs, and a lot of like, "Don't touch me," because that's not what men do. And so like physical touch, you know, I is discouraged among straight men in general of straight men of my generation. I mean, again, there's certainly Gen X men who have different experience, but and there's certainly plenty of homophobic Gen Zers. But I would say if you surveyed 100 Gen Zers and 100 Gen Xers, you would find a much higher ratio of
of
homophobia
Gen
among Gen Xers.
X, yeah. Yeah, I think there's a definitely a lot of hope for my generation to change the trajectory of masculinity.
Yeah.
There's a lot more of, hope for that. I think that the biggest issue I see is with Gen Z is not having an idea of what their own authentic masculinity is. They feel like they have to, like, because of the constant comparison and a constant, I wouldn't say, I don't know if it's like competition, but like maybe it might be, I think it's just more hidden where they feel I have to blend in with everyone because I want like a level of social acceptance. And
Mhm.
that might like, I feel like it's more like in small ways. I might like, maybe it's like social performance, always being like the guy that's always laughing or always or the guy that invites everyone. That could be like very different like roles that people, I feel like they don't like, they're not consciously saying like I'm gonna be like the jokester of the group, but they might like develop that, I think, out of just uh the um the validation they get from people out of that, and also because it's like it's easier than like, I feel like it's easier than vulnerability to a degree.
Well, yeah, and I mean, what you're describing is the conundrum we all have, right? Like, how do we know what authentic masculinity looks like if we don't have alternate models, if we don't
Yeah.
grow up with lots of different types of masculinity, or lots of different, like, how do we find ourselves when in the void, right? Is kind of,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's a real challenge, and it's a challenge for men especially. It's a challenge for everyone, but it's a challenge for men especially.
Yeah, I think too, going back to, like, the narrowness, maybe that's how, like, like, narrow like, this idea of narrow masculinity, how that affects Gen Z is that we feel that, or, like, certain members of Gen Z feel that, okay, there isn't, like, I don't have a solid definition of, like, masculinity, but what's already out there is, like, there isn't much out there.
Yeah,
If I don't adhere to this norm, then if I if I go in this role, I feel more comfortable with people accepting me and, like, easing into social acceptance.
of course.
Like, for example, for me, like, just me being sensitive, I wasn't sharing that with people. I wasn't as open, kind of like what I said before, I wasn't as open to talking about things that I was going through. So I kinda developed this role of, "Okay, I'm just going to help everyone else, but I can't allow people to, like, I can't receive."
Yeah.
So that could be, like, a role that's, like, developed throughout the years until you're like, "Wait, this is actually, like, very exhausting."
Yeah. Well, I mean,
Yeah.
think about, like, it's a weird analogy maybe, but think about, like, you're a songwriter and
Mhm.
all you know is 4/4. Like, that's all you've ever heard. That's all you know. You don't really like it. It's boring, but you want to write a song that's not in 4/4, but
Mhm.
you don't even know where to start.
Yeah, that's all you
Right?
know, yeah.
Like, now if you'd grown up listening to progressive jazz and, you knew how to do 7/8 time and, 13/12 time and, like, all, and then you'd have a palette to draw from. And then when you decided to,
Mhm.
because we're all copycats in the beginning of our identity formation. We have to be.
Yeah.
We're all plagiarists as teenagers. And then eventually, like, we get our tool set, our toolkit. Like, I remember I wrote a play like first year of college, and my high school teacher read it and she was like, "It's really great, but you need to give credit to Samuel Beckett, because it was very much like Beckett, and it's a huge influence on me. And I hadn't developed my voice yet. And so it's like
Mhm.
but after reading lots and lots of stuff and experiencing lots and lots of things, like, oh, okay, now I know there's a range of choices, and now I can figure out which choice I want to make.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
you can't do that in the absence of the understanding the range of choices.
Yeah, I think maybe it's, like, lack of, like, references that people have, so
Yep.
they feel like there's only one way to be in the world. So I think that sometimes creates a sense of, like, if you're, like, going through, like, a transition season, whether you're, like, graduating from college or from high school or, like, moving to a new city or state, you, like,
Mhm.
kind of, like, have, like, existential questions. But sometimes I think, like, existential questions might be, like, well, maybe have I been, like, true to myself? Not all the time. I think, like, on some levels, I think sometimes it's like, if I'm not, like, connected to my purpose, then am I living for myself or for other people?
Yep.
So I think I think that's how, like, that if we pressure ourselves to maintain this level of masculinity, that could play into that, where we're not, like, allowing ourselves to live authentically in the world.
Well, and you were talking about being relational. I mean, think about, so now imagine that you meet a romantic partner, and
Mhm.
now you're starting to get into a deep romantic relationship. Now you also have to have all those thoughts of, who am I really apart
Yeah.
from this person? Who am I alongside this person? And then what are the expectations if you're heterosexual, right? What are the expectations this person might have of a masculine or a male partner
Mhm.
versus what do I really want? I mean, we hear this all the time, men sort of thinking, oh, I have to perform what she wants me to perform,
Yeah.
you know, because she's the gatekeeper, right? Because women are burdened with being the gatekeepers of intimacy, right?
Mhm.
And what you're talking about earlier, what made me so happy about, your roommate and this friendship that you have is like that. Think about how great, first of all, how great that is for you. Hooray, that's awesome. But, like, also, how great is
I was so awkward about it. I was so, I told him, I said, "Yeah, like, you don't help me." It's like, "No."
he's like, no. But I was thinking, like, how great it is this for the women in your lives as well. you know,
Mhm.
because again, women have been burdened with the expectation that they're going to carry the emotional weight, right?
Yeah, it
They're going to
seems
be
like
the
a lot of
leaders.
now that you mention that, a lot of, like, the emotional intimacy that I have is with, like, a lot of my guy friends. I have, like, a lot of female friends, don't get me wrong, I have a lot, but, like, a lot of the emotional intimacy seems to be, like, talks with my guy friends, which is another shift. So I think on some level, I think Gen Z is developing, like, mindful masculinity, they're being more mindful about things. They're,
Mm,
like, asking or like, asking, like, "Okay, well, what's healthy?" You know, what do I actually want? And I think because people may have been, like, bombarded with a lot of messages of how they're supposed to be, that they get, like, so, like, exhausted of living that way, and then they want or exhausted from performing, which I could talk a lot about, like, performing when it comes to friendships. I think a lot of men feel they have to, like, perform, whether it's, like, trying to be I don't know. There's a lot of ways that we tend to try to, like, show off to, like, I guess, impress the other guy,
yeah,
but, like,
that's
what are
right.
we doing? But I don't know.
No,
But
it
yeah, I
manifests
think
itself in all kinds of places too. Like I was telling you, so I'm a board gamer and I'm actually going to be near Pittsburgh in a couple of months at the World
oh,
Board Gaming
interesting,
Championships. So yeah, out at Seven Springs, there's the World Board Gaming Championships.
interesting.
It's not all men, but it's like 90% men. Competition, performance, like stuff that happens, even in board gaming. Like you would not think of that as the most masculine sport. Some of the stuff that you'll see with like performance and like competitiveness, it's difficult for me because I'm
It's
also
very
an HSP, so like it can
yeah,
be hard.
it's very subtle. I feel like it's sometimes it's like, well, I have like, you have a car, but, like, you don't intend to be so performative, but, like, once you get validation from different things, like, okay, you have a really nice car, or you have, like or you work out a lot, or I don't know, you're very, like, intelligent. So those things, like, those are good things, but I think if we are attaching our identities to those things and our worth towards that, then we feel like we need to, like, present that all the time, and that could be very, like that could be that could lead to a performance and trying to, like, we're trying to impress our friends when really we want, like, genuine acceptance from people
Yep.
for who we are, our, like,
Yep.
authentic self. And if we feel like we have to, like if we feel like, "Oh, my friends won't want me around because I don't have, like, X, Y, and Z," then I think that's what we crave is, like, the true belonging, but that has to come through a level of authenticity.
Well, and yeah, and reinforcement, right? So like I always say that I'm not a big fan of saying I love you because it's such a generic thing to say, but I
Mhm.
really really like saying or hearing I love the person that you are.
Yeah.
Like I don't just generically love you, like I love the person that you are.
Yeah.
And that's like such a more meaningful thing to hear. And it's not about performance. It's not like, oh, I love your sense of style or I love your car or I love, whatever. I no, no, I love you. I love you when you're angry. I love you when you're happy. I love you when you're sad and when you fail. And I love you when you succeed.
Yeah, I think that is, I think, 1, that is scary to a lot of men, and then I think 2, I think they don't have, like I think some people might not have, like, experience with that because it's, like, unconditional positive regard,
Yep.
and that unconditional acceptance is, like I think that's also what made me feel uncomfortable initially in my friendship with Alex, is that I'm not used to this unconditional positive regard. It's like it just because he's like, oh, because whenever he approached me, I was like, I really wanted because we originally we weren't supposed to be roommates because it was like band camp, so we were still deciding dorms. So it's like he approached me first. It's like I really want to be your roommate. It's like, well, I'm very like introverted. I'm very like standoffish. So he was like, yeah. And I was like, I wasn't used to that like acceptance of my personality.
Mm.
So I think, I don't know if like a lot of men can relate, is that yeah, like we feel that we don't know how to receive unconditional positive regard in that way, where we're like, okay, does this person still enjoy my presence when I'm like at my best, or if I'm not, what have you? I think if you experience that, that's more of like I guess you can call it like I don't know, like a new emotional experience or new corrective experience or whatever. It's very
Yeah.
new.
Well, and where are you gonna get that? Like where are the cultural models for that, right? Like,
Yeah.
especially for Gen Z, like this is a problem that Gen Z is facing, right? Like, where do you experience when you look at people's Instagram feed, or you look at like the people's YouTube shorts or TikTok shorts or whatever, like they're flawless, right? Everything's edited, everything's
Yeah.
perfect, everything's filtered, everything's, pitch corrected, whatever. And so it's like people don't expose themselves to the criticism of, the flawed self, right?
Yeah.
And so there's no model of there's lots of models of approval, right? There's the thumbs up and
Yeah.
heart
The
and
heart,
and stuff like
yeah.
that. There's lots of models of,
Liking your posts.
but they're not liking, they might not be liking the true you. They're liking the
Yeah.
performative you, right?
Yeah.
Which is a whole different kind of pressure. And for men, we don't have models. Like, who's the model of culture wide, looking at politicians and actors and, athletes and whoever.
Archetypes.
Yeah. Who's the model of the flawed man who also gets unconditional love? Right? No,
Yeah.
it's the successful man. It's the, accomplished man. It's the winner.
Mhm.
It's the whatever, right? I mean, I'm not saying there's none, but there aren't very many,
Yeah. Yeah, there's
right?
not. Yeah. And I think with in regard to Gen Z, I think that's why, like, what I like my content, like, is more about, like, authenticity. That's what I try to, like, push because you see a lot of like, there's nothing wrong with, like, sharing your accomplishments with the world and sharing those things. But I think, like, too, and my content is mental health, so it kinda has to be, like, authentic to a degree, so it kinda has to be.
Yeah.
So I think but just sharing content that is about real things and real like, that has substance to it instead of just because I don't, like, present myself as, like, accomplished. I try to make sure, like, what I'm presenting, like, to the listeners is that I'm, like, in the process of, like, learning and, like, being on a journey because I feel like that's what people really need. We all need to, like, mirror each other, but we need, like, a real mirror of, wait, like, no one is actually, like, has figured out adulthood or figured out how to, like, be about in the world. We're just, like, all figuring out. So I think that's what people, like, kinda crave, but what they're seeing is, like what you said with the constant, approval, the constant likes. They're seeing something that's, like, different from their, like, internal experience, and it's like, then that's when they invalidate their own experience, whether it be as a man or just in general, because they don't see it. I think that's when, like, we could tend to feel, like, more isolated than we really are if we're not, like, sharing our experiences with one another or what we're actually like feeling. I think that could like lead to a lot of, everyone else is just doing great, but I'm the only
Mhm.
one.
Well, and we also have to be less afraid. Like, you've used the word vulnerability a lot, and I'm a big
Mhm.
advocate of, leading with vulnerability, but that there's risk.
Yeah, it's a
Being
lot of fear.
vulnerable and being authentic is risky because, people might not like the authentic you, and
Mhm.
also you're going to mess up. Like, that's the other thing. You can't be afraid to make mistakes. Like,
Yeah,
we're going to mess up when we're vulnerable, and when it's a huge risk that we're going to take, and we just need to be able to take it, you know?
yeah.
But it can be hard.
A huge thing. Another huge thing that I see is social anxiety. I see it
Yep,
a lot.
yep,
Like I don't know if you see it within like college students or just with like college men, college age
yeah.
men, or just
Oh, yeah, well, especially the
men in
last few
general.
years because we have we're now the students coming through college now, we're like the COVID teenagers,
Yeah,
and so they're really a lot of them are struggling with social anxiety.
I see social anxiety like in regard to like, that could go in I guess for men, it might show up as more like performance. I
Mhm,
see it as more of like, more risk avoidance, like, just not willing to, like, even, like, normal things, like socializing, feeling pressure to present, a certain self. Like, I've had a lot of people open up to me about that. And I'm like, if this is a common thing, then what are we mindfully looking at our identities? If this is like so common, like this social pressure that's causing social anxiety, and we're not like if what we crave, there's a difference between like what we crave and like which is like real intimacy or real like belonging. There's
mhm.
a difference between that and then like what we're either getting or what we're like what's happening.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, and I mean, I think you've hit the nail on the head. Like, that's, and authenticity is not, I mean, we use that word, but, we are social. Humans are social. We're primates. And so it's hard to, I don't think we can get, we have to be careful not to get too philosophical about being authentic. Like
Mhm.
we are naturally social, and therefore we naturally mimic, and we naturally sort of, um, alter ourselves in order to belong in social situations. And that's not inherently a bad thing as
Yeah, it's
long as we're
not.
not doing it all the time.
Yeah, I think that's where the exhaustion comes from.
Yeah.
Is that like that then that becomes like your whole like identity.
Oh yeah, I mean, look, I'm autistic, so you don't have to talk to me about masking. I mean, I know all about that. Oh,
Yeah, so I think that's I think that's what it comes down to. I think also with because you mentioned an important thing of I think or like I think some people might feel like, well, does that mean I'm fake? I don't think it's that like people are fake or like they're faking it. Yeah, to a degree, you want to like it's okay to have like a social mask for like that specific time, but like it's more like the pressure behind doing that all the time. It's like we gotta like tackle that pressure if we want to have like real relationships. We got to tackle like where's the pressure coming from? Because sometimes it's coming from like I have all these like beliefs about how I should be, and that's not actually like that's I'm like been suppressing my like actual identity based on the beliefs that I've carried for so long.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it manifests in all kinds of ways. I mean, like, it manifests in dating, where people will say that they're attracted to people, but it's always like they're attracted to the socially normative, attractive person. But
That's
then deep
interesting.
down, yeah, deep down, they might not actually be interested, but they
Mhm.
feel like they have to perform that. They feel
Like,
like
ideally, I'm attracted to the ideal.
yeah. Yeah, or they feel like they have to be at a party, they have to behave a certain way, to, like,
Yeah.
hit on people or something, but that's not really what they
That's
want,
not right.
Like, that's not necessarily what they really want deep down, but they can't access what they really want because they're too afraid that if they access what they really want, people will
Mhm.
perceive that as bad, or people will perceive that as not
Yeah.
not bad, I mean, the idea of, like, brotherhood, for lack of a better word, I think can be a very powerful thing as long as it doesn't become an exclusionary club, but rather I appreciate you for your mutual humanity and your
Yeah.
beauty and uniqueness. And, like, I'm on your side. I mean, not just because you're a guy, like, it's because you're a human being, but okay,
Mhm.
if it takes I'm on your side because you're a guy, okay, maybe that'll open the door. I don't know, but, like,
I
more in
think
the sense
that's
of that mutuality I think is really important.
I think that's why I never like, this is my personal belief, and I have friends that are in fraternities, but I just never because you know, but I think too, when it comes to, like, the sense of brotherhood, I think what people really want is to feel included, but without feeling like they have to perform to be included.
Yes, 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 exactly.
Yeah. So, and I think I see that a lot. It's like, people value, relationships where they feel like they don't have to, uh, measure up to a standard or measure up to a certain, like, masculine ideal. So I feel like there's more, like, there's more intimacy, there's more, like, happiness in those, relationships, so
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's why if you can't find some solace with, interpersonally with someone else and be able to be your true self, like, how can anybody spend their whole life just performing a self that they're not, right? Like, I mean, that of course
yeah.
that's gonna lead to misery, that's gonna
Yeah.
lead to anxiety, all the words you've been using for this
Well,
last
and the
hour and
thing
a
is,
half.
like, when I've, like in conversation with my therapist, he said, like, men, even in their, like, you know, 40s and 50s or what have you, like, they start to realize, like, "Oh, like, I've actually been performing for, like, a lot of my life."
Mhm.
So I think,
Mhm.
like yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
yeah,
It never goes away. Masculinity is a
exactly.
performance. I mean, you can read about it. I can off screen, I can recommend. I'll email you some books to read.
Yeah. Well, this was an amazing conversation. I don't know if you have, like, any other points that you wanted to go over?
No, no. I mean, I always like to talk like a man, but it's too much.
Oh, I for yeah, I forgot about
We're
that.
already 90 minutes in. It's totally fine. No,
I
it's
forgot about Talk
I've
Like a
talked
Man.
about it on other podcasts. It's totally
I forgot about that.
no, no. It's just because, well, because the only thing I want to say is that, like, what gets me excited about this movement and, like, what got me into men's work was the idea of presenting alternative masculinities, more broad
Yeah.
forms of masculinity, and as a form of social modeling. And that's all I really want to say about it, is like that's what Talk Like a Man is. It's just supposed to be like, here it started as like a Tumblr where I had like
Mhm.
all of these memes, and all these links to just like different ways of being masculine and different. And so like
Mhm.
that's really what I'm all about, is just saying like, you know, I I feel it's going back to my analogy earlier. It's like I'm the music teacher who's exposing everybody to all the odd time signatures. Like I want to make
Mhm.
sure that young men know that like there's all kinds of different ways to be a man, to be masculine,
Yeah, I think
and
that's
yeah. So
yeah.
that's really
I
that's the crux of it. That's the whole point of the project.
Going off that, I think that's very valuable to young men, especially, or people that are still forming their identities, to see that there can be, like, variation or variability. I think that can encourage people to really, um, really avoid, adopting an identity that isn't them when
Yeah.
they see, like, other ways presented, so
Yeah, I mean, let's cut it off at the pass so that we don't have as many men in their 40s and 50s, feeling like they've been performing
yeah,
for 30 years.
yeah, so
Right? But yeah, thanks. No, it was really good. It was good talking to you.
yeah, it's an amazing discussion. I'll let you know when I publish this. It will be very, like, probably far in the future because I have so many different episodes and projects to work
Oh, I
on,
understand.
so
I understand. Trust me. I've had episodes that took me 6 months to get out. I'm subscribed to your YouTube channel, so I'll probably get a notification.
Okay. That's solid, that's good.
Yeah, thanks. It was good meeting you.
Yeah, good meeting you too.